This is Matt Rivera, the Vice President of Marketing for Yo. And today you've joined us for Ready, Set, Wait, Managed Staffing Programs. We're going to talk today about getting ready for a managed staffing program, the things you need to know, and the things that are going to help you be prepared when you decide to embark on this journey. And I think as you'll find from our panelists today, it is a bit of a journey. And we're going to take you through that and help you with what you need to know and when you need to know it. So by way of introductions, joining me today are Robin Johnson. She's the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Solutions for Yo and manages all of our large engagements for managed services throughout the country and the UK. We have Jackie Milligan with us, the VP of Implementation for Yo, who has a great deal of experience in implementation of various managed staffing programs, managed services programs of all types, again, in various places throughout the world. We're lucky today to have with us Joanne Murphy, who is from PJM Interconnection. She's from procurement at PJM, and she's a great resource for us and our favorite customer at Yo for this service. She's been a long time customer, and PJM has been a great partner with us. For those of you who don't know, PJM is a regional transmission organization out here in the Pennsylvania suburbs that coordinates the movement of wholesale electricity through 13 states and the District of Columbia in the Northeast. You probably remember from some of the summers when you get reports of when the grid gets to high usage. PJM is one of the ones that reports and helps us manage those things in the Northeast. We are here in Philadelphia. My name again is Matt Rivera, the VP of Marketing for Yo. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's take a look at the agenda. We're going to go through pretty quickly today the goals. We're going to talk about where to start and how to manage the change that is inevitable in this type of managed services engagement. You're going to get some great insight about how we go about this, who needs to be involved. We'll give you a couple of stories along the way. And then we have my favorite part, which is the lightning round, which probably nobody on the panel likes, but I like it because it goes fast and and the scores can change very quickly during the lightning round. So that's the agenda for today. If you have questions, you can type them in the question box, and we'll try to take them at the end. If we don't get to some of those, we can always post some information as we get those in the future or through comments, those types of things. So you are muted. You won't be able to answer any questions or ask any questions directly, but through the questions portal you have. So we have three great perspectives, one from the MSP side, one from implementation, and one from the client side. So we're going to have a great discussion today. So let's get started. All right. I think it's a good place to start with the end in mind, particularly with this, and you're going to see as we go through how it's a journey, but let's talk about what we want to get accomplished with a managed staffing program and the goals of the program. You see some of them listed here, and hopefully as you go through an implementation, this is one of the first things you'll encounter. So let's start with Joanne. And let's start with the client perspective. And when you're setting up a contingent labor program, or you're given the task of managing the contingent labor program, what are some of the goals that you had in mind when you went about setting up your program, Joanne?
Yeah, we had a couple, actually. We had several different sort of targeted areas we wanted to focus on. One that was important then, and it's also still important now, is really finding the best candidates. Finding the best talent that we can in this area for the positions that we have open. So, I mean, it's really key for us to have a big pool, but also to lessen the burden on our hiring managers so that they're not having to go through 30, 40, 50 resumes. They really are looking at just the best applicants for those open positions. So definitely finding the best candidate was our #1 priority, has been, will be in the future. I think some of the other additional goals that we had was obviously mitigating risk. So for us, you know, co-employment issues, validation of 1099 status, just sort of putting an additional layer of protection for us. That was definitely a goal. It may not be the goal when you talk to the hiring manager in IT, but it definitely is the goal when you talk to our general counsel and our risk manager. So that was definitely a key part of it. I think another key, again, is cost savings, cost management, cost containment, whatever you want to actually classify that as. Really just visibility into what we're paying, not paying too much, not underpaying, because that's a risk also where you underpay and you just don't get a quality candidate if you're not paying the right amount. So I think containing costs really is a good way of putting it. And then another for us really is managing the consultants and the contractors that we have here on site. So having a single point of contact, having a consistent message that goes out to everyone, even if it's something as simple as, holidays or if there's inclement weather or something like that, having a single point of contact through the managed program to all of the contractors, it actually works out really well for us. And I think part of it is also helped by the fact that we have a pretty robust VMS tool as well. So that enables us to sort of meet all of those goals.
That's great, and you covered a lot of ground there with a lot of the different things that a managed services program can impact. And certainly as you're going through the process of deciding that, one of the things you need to kind of think about as you're going through the stages of your implementation is, how do goals impact that? So Jackie, talk a little bit about how those goals and some of the things that Joanne was talking about impact the implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. So it definitely impacts the scope in terms of what you're going to include within the implementation. Also, your deployment approach. So if you are looking at, as your generation 1, is it easier for your organization to do it in more of a phased approach? Is it easier to tackle contingent labor first and get that up and running and then focus on SOW because that's where maybe more of the cost savings are, or the change management, if the cost savings is one of your goals for the program. Where do you focus first? Can your organization handle a big bang, or again, do you do more of a phased approach?
That's great, and Robin, from the MSP perspective, somebody managing this or helping a client through this process and starting out, what do you hear from them? And what are some of the most common goals, and maybe how do they change over time as you kind of go through this evolution of this kind of journey I was talking about earlier?
Sure. So I think all the items that Joanne outlined, they can be the initial objectives for an organization, or initially it might only be one or two of those items, and then as they begin to see vendors, they have a deeper understanding of a program, what it can do for them, what could be in versus out in a first generation. So I think that how it changes and evolves is as they become more educated, their objectives change and their objectives grow. In addition, from a change management perspective, as then the key stakeholders are also educated, the walls start to come down. They start to see the benefits of outsourcing the management of their contingent workforce and all non-employee labor. The other piece that you see a change and an evolution, once an organization gains visibility with a program, visibility through a vendor management system, so that technology gives visibility they don't usually have initially, they then can have a plan of attack around the items that Joanne outlined, whether that be mitigation of risk and better controls, or increasing the quality of talent that they receive, because the access to the supply base will be greater through a managed service provider than what they're going to be able to access through an individual manager-by-manager basis. So you have a manager who puts a call in to his favorite supplier. He's getting the talent that that supplier provides, versus having the access to the supply base that the managed service provider brings to your program. So you should receive a higher level of quality at a more competitive price, and having the visibility into that supply base through the VMS. You definitely see that change over time.
So a lot of the things that you've heard our panelists talk about in this section of goals are really kind of key to what we're talking about doing here. And some of the things that I'll kind of pull out there were kind of that idea of whether you do it all at once or a phased approach, or how your organization deals with change, and how that determines how quickly you can provide the different benefits that you're trying to provide, and which ones you focus on at different points. We certainly have clients at every step of that process where maybe it's just very simply trying to get it centralized and a program going through, and at other, at the other end of the spectrum, it's getting many other non-employee groups into a managed program, into the level of visibility and controls that you have with a contingent labor program. So let's move on to, having the goals are great, and you need to know that, but I guess probably one of the biggest questions, certainly if you're listening today, is where do I start? How do I get started with these types of programs? So Jackie, let's start with probably everyone's favorite kind of idea of data. What data and things are involved in here? What's good to know? And then is it always accurate, or can you sometimes kind of go down some different paths to try to find that data?
Yeah, data is actually one of the most critical components, and it happens pretty early on within the implementation because you need to understand where you're starting from. Typically, what we see is that not all of the data is captured in the beginning, and you have deltas that just kind of get filled in as the implementation moves on, and that's things like understanding who your current supplier base is, where all the workers are located, who are actually all your hiring managers that are, or end users that are utilizing contingent workers, utilizing your ERP system, your financial system, your HRIS system is usually where we say to start. We also really like to utilize and reach out to the supplier network to have them validate, because they're going to have the most accurate, up-to-date information in regards to who they're paying and invoicing you for. That can take a while, and there's several iterations that you have to understand that you'll go through to get that, because things will flush out. Workers, or spend gets hidden under other categories, so we'll help you understand what to look for in your systems and how to identify where that can happen, so that when you're at the end point of your implementation, you should really have a really good understanding of your total data and your population and your spend and where that spend is, so that you start day one with clean data.
Obviously, really important. Now, Joanne, from your perspective, from a client, what do you track typically as from the client side with respect to contingent workers or non-employees and that population? And does that spend end up in a hiring manager's budget? And do you find that it was hard maybe initially to get that data or to gain visibility over what was going on?
Yeah, I think for us it's both. So we have some of our contingent labor that's actually in the hiring manager's cost center. We also have some of the developers who actually charge their hours against some of our capital projects. So it's both. I mean, we have it going in multiple areas. But I think from the initial get-go, getting as much data as possible is always ideal, and it's not always realistic to have a complete picture. But I think that's not something to hold you back. Like, I think if you can get to a point where you have 50% of the information or 80% of the information on where your contractors are, what companies they're working for, if you can get your hands around that part of it, that's a great place to start, knowing that it's going to continue to evolve over time. And we put our program in place in 2007, and it has continued to evolve year over year over year. Even up to the point of just 2014, we had probably 5 or 6 new companies who were traditionally more of a consultant company. They were sort of statement of work based, but I use that term very loosely. It really was time and materials under the guise of being a statement of work, and we rolled them into the program this year, and it's been great. So we couldn't have done that if we didn't have an established program up front. So it would have been much more difficult to do that with those individuals and those companies, but by having a good set and a good foundation and then it continuing to grow, I think that's a good approach.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think what you're talking about there too is that with change management, which we'll talk about in a little bit, there's only so much you can take on maybe that you're prepared for at the time that you're implementing that. So Robin, one of the things we have and that we're kind of talking about this spend that might be kind of hidden in different areas. Give us an idea of how you define rogue spend, and is it common in most clients, and what do we see as far as how much that they would probably end up finding maybe later that they didn't even know about in the beginning?
Right. So
rogue spend is really defined as suppliers that are being utilized outside of a managed service program. In regards to how that occurs and how much that is, it really depends on the organization and how locked down they have access to the organization. So for instance, when you put a program in place like a managed service program, and let's just say phase one is just around your contract labor, you put guardrails and compliance around that program. Typically what you find is that when you shut a door, you open another door. So you're going to then open the door to managers utilizing statement of work and or bringing in ICs around the program. So it really goes back to change management as we talk about that piece of it. Change management starting at the forefront of the implementation before you go live, because otherwise you really are opening one door when you lock down another. So those are all things that as you're working through your implementation that you can define and try to pull in access so that you can limit that rogue spend.
Great. And as you're pulling this together, obviously one of the questions that comes up is how you kind of organize where you're going to start an RFP is sometimes a way to start. Do you have any thoughts on RFPs from the panel, Jackie, in particular on what the kind of the purpose and how an RFP might or might not serve you well?
Yeah, I mean, I think RFPs are really an introduction to the client of the MSP. I think the data that is provided in an RFP gives a very high level overview of an organization, but I think what even customers find out is that what they thought they knew that they put in an RFP is very different once they get into the implementation and start looking under the covers. So I think it provides the MSP a little bit of an oversight, but it really serves more of a purpose, in my opinion, that it just provides the client more of an introduction to the MSP and their capabilities.
Good.
Yeah, the only thing, I would add a couple of things to that. I think it does give a client an objective scorecard, so it can be overwhelming when you embark, especially a Generation 1. How do you evaluate all these suppliers? They all look good on paper. They all sound good. So it gives you some guidelines from that perspective. I would add that you should just not to over-engineer it. So we do see companies get extremely bogged down trying to include every intricate detail about their organization and about what they anticipate their program to be and what their needs to be in the RFP and in evaluating the responses. So I think, to Jackie's point, it's a great starting point for an organization, but I think it's putting it in perspective and what purpose it serves.
Great. Joanne, you have anything to add to RFPs?
Yeah, I can sort of jump in just on RFPs in general. I totally agree. Again, from a procurement standpoint, we love RFPs. So I do think that it is a good starting point, but I don't think it's the end-all, be-all. And I think you guys brought up a good point that it really does open the door for additional questions to be asked. So it's a good starting point, and I think it's a good approach, but know that you're going to have follow-on conversations with the companies that you're evaluating. And even if you're shortlisting down to 2 or 3, you're really going to want to have additional conversations and additional on-site meetings or whatever it happens to be. It's a starting point, but you definitely have to have more conversations. It's not a once and done through the RFP process.
That's great. Yeah, I think you guys kind of hit it on the head, right? It's that starting point where you kind of, the conversations that you have later and, as you're kind of building starting on building that partnership starts with those conversations, not with just an RFP on paper. So let's move along to change management. And obviously, this is a big change for most companies. If you go from, as Robin was talking about, you're talking about a hiring manager who had their own process or maybe their own suppliers are doing their own thing, and now you're suddenly asking them to change what they do and conform to, of whatever the program is. And invariably, no matter how great you put together the implementation and build the case for it, there's always going to be some that are impacted in some kind of way that makes them feel uncomfortable or makes change management kind of really, really important. So I guess on this one, Joanne, I'll start with you. How does a company like PJM handle change management, and what kind of role does the culture and the environment play in that?
So, and this is funny because I've joked about this before, but we're very open to change and we embrace it, which is a joke because I don't think that there's any company out there that is just gung-ho for change ever. I think that it's always challenging, even if you're in a bad spot and you know you're in a bad spot with a convoluted process and you want to get out of it. The change is always going to be challenging and the change is always difficult and you're always going to have people who resist. So I think in order to be successful with that, you really have to, first of all, identify the pain points currently. What do you have now? Are you not getting good candidates? Whatever the pain points are, that's probably your best starting point. And for us, it was also then selling the benefits of the program. Once you identify the pain points, the program will solve a lot of them. And also sort of leveraging your internal relationships also with your managers. So from a procurement standpoint, I meet with our IT managers. I meet with people throughout the organization. I find out how things are going and how we can help them. Because again, back to my original, what are some of the goals of the program? If I'm talking to a hiring manager in IT, I really don't think that they care about 1099 validation or co-employment risk as much as our general counsel does. So those aren't things that I would discuss with them, but getting the right candidate, what are the right costs, what are the right candidates for the positions, but also time to fill those positions. So for us, I think it's a matter of continuously working the program. Even now, like I had said before, 2007 we implemented the program. I'm still talking about it as recently as this past Friday, talking about the program, what the benefits are of the program, and answering questions. Because again, there's always new managers who are coming in who may not be as familiar with it. So we talk about it all the time. We talk about it, and we've been pretty successful.
That's great, and I think you brought up a couple of good points there about, everybody's open, says they're open to change, but when it comes right down to it, it's always, it could be a different story. You're right. They don't, when you're forced to change, and when it comes down to that time, it's always a little bit different story. Now, Jackie, one of the things we talk about when we bring in a program is branding that program. The idea, what does it mean to brand your program as you come in and start talking about how things are going to change?
Yeah, so branding is anything from, naming the program, providing logo around it, and that can vary from, organization to organization. The benefits of it, and I've seen it done both ways, where it's branded, where it's not branded, and branding tends to lend itself to the successful integration into an organization. It lets the program be more of an extension versus, and a partnership versus focusing on, oh, the MSP, our MSP vendor is, this and doing this. It actually incorporates it into the culture of the organization and lets it be an extension, and it helps provide an opportunity for folks to buy into it more versus keeping kind of that line as you would with maybe if you have a true supplier relationship.
And when you talk about partnership, right, it certainly involves now, another company coming in and an MSP coming in. So, Robin, what role does the MSP play in this whole idea of change management as you're coming in with your tools and the things that, an MSP brings to the engagement?
Sure. I mean, just to piggyback on, what's already been said, clearly, ideally, the change management process has started prior to the RFP. So the company and the key executive stakeholders, as well as the executive sponsor, are bought into the change that's going to need to occur. But we find that companies are at just different points in that evolution, in that process. And so we do, from a consultative approach, we do bring the tools and the talent and the expertise to our customers to help guide them through the change and the evolution change once we're engaged. And we can be as active and or provide all of the tools that we have to the customer depending on what they have internally. And then we'll continue post-go live to continue to align ourselves with the message that Joanne just delivered, years later, educating managers, offering training, continuing to bring issues where we see a lack of change or buy into the program and help execute. the change management process so that the overall program is successful.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a couple things that's important. One of the things that as you go through this change management process that we encounter along the way that I was talking about in the beginning is how hiring managers, how this impacts them. But if any of the panelists can give us an idea, what's one of the most important things to help with program adoption that if you could point to maybe one or two things that really help with getting everybody on the same page and running forward, anything that you guys can point to that would help?
I think from my perspective, from an implementation perspective, I think it's understanding your organization. It's getting down to the actual user level, especially your high volume engagement managers, and it's getting them involved early on and letting them be part of the process and help to drive it so they become your change agents within your organization versus dictating it and getting them kind of up to speed as you're rolling it out. I think that upfront work goes a long way in providing that to an organization.
And Joanne, you have any thoughts on that? How do you get managers and everybody kind of in with you and to adopt the program and again become even advocates of the program from your side?
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, we kind of have a top-down, bottom-up, and sideways approach. So we kind of come at it from all sides. And I do think sometimes your most challenging managers, if you get them on board, probably not first, but if you can get them on board, they then become the biggest advocates. So start with the easy things, start with the staff augmentation, the traditional contractor roles, roll those in, and then you go after the niche vendors and the managers who have their favorite niche vendors. Once you get those into the program, at that point, the majority now is in the program rather than not being in the program, and the rest will just chip away at it slowly but surely. So I think that's probably the best approach.
Yeah, I think that's great advice because we've seen that time and time again where we have managers who were resistant in the beginning but become big advocates of it once they see the value, and they were typically some of the biggest users. So let's talk about some of the folks that are involved in this and the players that are involved at every different level. So let's start at the top because I think that's probably the most obvious, and we've already touched on it I think a couple of times here. So Jackie, give us kind of the lowdown on executive support. How important is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the most critical components. I've seen implementations fail to even launch without the executive support from, especially from your C-suite. Also, if you do get through an implementation, then I've seen programs, not be successful because, it's easy to get around the program, go outside the guidelines without having that engagement at your executive level. I think they need to be, and it's not just one individual. If you're an organization that has multiple lines of business, ensuring that whoever the president of that business is or the lead of that is involved as well, all the way across the organization. And then as you get into your corporate support functions, so your IT department, they absolutely have to have sponsorship at the executive level there. So even when you get into finance, HR, all of those leads at the executive level need to have the buy-in and ability to support the program from a messaging standpoint and from sometimes a hard decision-making standpoint as well in order to really let the implementation and then the program be as successful as it can be.
So, Joanne, you have an interesting situation at PJM, and we certainly deal with different stakeholders from a procurement or HR perspective in different programs, but you and procurement and HR actually share responsibility for the program. So tell us how that works at PJM.
Yeah, we do. Actually, from an executive level, we actually have 2 executive sponsors. Our Vice President of HR and Corporate Client Services is one, and HR reports up through her, and then our CFO and Senior Vice President for Finance I report to. So from an HR and procurement, we do share responsibility for this. At any point in time, either one of us will take the lead on certain things. But we really do share at an executive level and also at the day-to-day management level and through our teams. We kind of, it's a shared responsibility. So I would say in most companies it's either one or the other, but even if it is residing only in HR or only in procurement, you really still have to work together. You sort of have to be in lockstep with each other because, again, it's not always easy, and if you're both on the same page, it goes much more quickly, and you sort of need to be the support system for each other. And so for us, again, don't go it alone. Bring everybody with you. So for us, it's actually worked out really well.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point on, it probably limits the finger pointing and some of the other things that can happen as you kind of get into making some of those decisions and some of those.
Right, and even if you just need a sanity check, sometimes there are questions that come up and you're like, well, this is what I think, but I really need to bounce it off somebody else. If you know somebody, it in lockstep with what you're doing. So again, between HR and procurement, we're constantly in communication on how we're handling certain things and what we're doing, and it just helps validate, yeah, you know what, we're doing the right thing.
And you bring up a really good point about communication. So Robin, from the MSP perspective, who do you typically work with at the client, and does there need to be a lead person or a role on the client side to work with the MSP?
Absolutely. So I think it depends on the organization and in terms of where sponsorship comes from. To make a just real general statement, we see procurement taking the lead for managed service programs. That's most prevalent. HR would be second, finance being third. Culturally, I think it depends on the way your company gets things done. So there is exceptions to that, and you've got to have a lead. So that's usually the hardest part to get the program off the ground, is for an organization to be able to identify a lead through implementation and dedicate a resource. It needs to be one at a level that can move things forward, make sure the organization is meeting deadlines to keep the overall implementation and program on its timeline.
That's some really great advice there. If you didn't catch that, having somebody that has the ability to get things done in the organization, it's not really kind of that administrative kind of push things around role. Usually that's what helps to get that done. One of the things you mentioned, Jackie, earlier, real quick to touch on it, is IT. So why is it important to have IT involved, and why do some companies not necessarily think about that in the beginning?
Yeah, so as the VMS partner is part of the three-legged stool, if you will, of the implementation, and there's a considerable amount of things that need to be considered as well as done in order to implement with the VMS. We find that especially when you talk integrations, your IT department needs to be engaged not only from a work standpoint, but definitely from a subject matter expert, so that they understand and can have a technical discussion with the technical folks at the VMS partner. So another reason is because IT typically is very in demand in most organizations, and they have long roadmaps that are already booked. So in order to get the project visibility and the resources and the prioritization, that is always a conversation that we recommend that is happening well even before RFP, but at least at RFP time, and as you move into implementation, that they become part of the core team.
That's that whole idea of I don't think you want to go to IT and tell them, hey, we've got this whole new program we're going to launch tomorrow. Just thought you'd like to be aware, and we're going to come into your environment and change a bunch of stuff. Probably not a good idea.
No, it's not, and I've seen implementations go completely on hold for a period of time until the resource and that conversation can happen within an organization.
Or even possibly get completely derailed by that whole process that may not fit within their environment. So that's a good lesson learned right there, and that takes us to kind of our next one. What I've asked our panelists to do, they have a quick kind of case study lesson learned that they can share with us. So anybody would like to go first and give us kind of a quick case study or quick lesson learned that you've seen from some of these implementations?
I think just piggybacking on what Jackie just said, and we just recently, had a customer who was, well into their buying cycle, so they'd already invested the time into creating an RFP and working with the businesses to understand the requirements for their each of their individual units, and waited to loop in their IT departments as to what would be required for integration to really power the program. And based on available resources, push the project out over the rest of the calendar year as a result of that. So you can really lose momentum, which I think hurts the credibility of the sponsors internally. So understanding resource availability, the process to bring IT resources to your project is, I think, a critical piece, and it affects overall, your credibility within your own organization.
It's a really good point. Jackie, got something?
Yeah, so I think it's, a good lesson learned is really to let the MSP, lead you through the project. Let the MSP be your guide. It's, it's what we do. It's what we have a dedicated team of experts that do. I've had an organization that didn't do that as well, and they really took the lead and let the MSP be secondary and didn't let us guide them through it. And it was a very bumpy go live. There were a lot of things that were missed in regards to recommendations that we made to the client, but we did a second phase and changed that around and let us lead and take our lead on it and our guidance, and it was a very different experience for their organization on their second phase. So I would say just, really utilize your MSP, their project management team, their tools, and the expertise that they have.
That's really good advice. Joanne, anything you'd like to add as well?
Yeah, no, I would actually chime in and totally agree with that. So let them guide you through the process, but also from the client perspective, you also have to support the program. So you're managing the program, you're still managing it. Sometimes you have to intervene with one of the hiring managers if it's challenging, and sometimes you have to intervene with one of the suppliers. So you really have to stay involved. It's not a day-to-day thing, but there are times where you have to. Again, it's not a set it and forget it, and you walk away, because then it'll just wither on the vine. But allow the program to actually, this is why you have them. They're the experts in it. They're managing it. Allow it to work, but also stay involved. We had a situation, just sort of lessons learned, where we were actually probably a year and a half, actually maybe 2 years ago, where we were just challenged with finding the right candidates. And so digging in, peeling back the layers a little bit, found out that we actually were getting great resumes, but the manager was taking sometimes 1 to 2 weeks to respond to the resumes. And while that might be okay with an FTE position, for a contractor, good contractors don't last, right? So if you get a resume, you need to act on it quickly. And we were able to determine, hey, you had 4 great candidates, and by the time you got around to reviewing those resumes, they were already placed at other positions, right, outside of the company. So that's one of the things that we've worked with the managers on a timeline, sort of creating that sense of urgency, and it's really improved over time.
That's really good advice, and we've seen that time and again too, and looking and analyzing what's going on, like you said, as the client taking responsibility for things you need to take care of, and the MSP taking care of the things that they need to take care of, and then coming together on what those things are. All right, so not that we haven't covered a ton of great information up to this point, because there are some things in there that I think are really important to keep in mind, and great lessons from a great team here who's gone through this from different perspectives. But let's now go to the lightning round, my favorite part of the broadcast, where the scores can really change, and we all kind of squirm to kind of think something very quick. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you the opportunity to pass if you want to pass. I'm going to go through each one, so because we want to make it through here in a timely fashion, and because our guest is on the phone, we're going to let Joanne go first with these. So Joanne, don't feel like you have to answer each one, but I will start with you, and then you can pass, and then we'll go through and get through these pretty quickly and see how we do. All right, so let's get started. Joanne, so the first question is, what's your top readiness tip?
So I would say after you have executive support, definitely work your internal relationships that you have with your peers. Definitely work your internal channels and sort of anticipate the challenges up front. Definitely need that.
All right, Robin, what do you got?
get your data in order. You're going to have a better program if you have your data in order right out of the gate.
Awesome. Jackie?
Understand that this is a transformation for your organization, not just an implementation, and be realistic about what that entails and the amount of work and what your organization will need to absorb during that.
It's great, and nobody's used their pass yet. This is great. Okay, Joanne, let's go on to the next one. Biggest mistake you've made or have seen?
I would say not managing the program and staying involved. Again, letting it wither on the vine. So go live and forget it is a huge mistake. You have to keep involved.
All right, Robin?
Not letting the MSP guide you through the process.
Mm-hmm.
Jackie?
Lack of executive sponsorship.
All right. So I guess everybody should be getting that that's a very important thing. We've covered that a couple of times. All right, let's go to the next one. Best advice you received, Joanne. What's the best advice you received?
Oh, I don't know about that one. I would say be firm but flexible. Know when you have to dig your heels in and know when the person who's digging in, when to move on.
Oh, that's great advice. Robin?
Stay focused on winning the war, not every battle.
Like it. Jackie?
Always go with your gut. Always trust your gut.
Ah, that's really good. Okay, great. Best thing you ever did related to CW management. Joanne, what do you got for that one?
Oh, that's a good answer. So I would say our managed service program with Yo.
Oh, that's a great opportunity. All right, good job. All right, Robin?
Our best customer, bringing on PJM.
Yeah, got the Love Fest is going. This is great. And Jackie, what do you got?
I have to pass. I have no idea.
Oh, she's all right. We got very far without using our passes. It's fantastic. Okay, quick. Now this is a lightning round, so you have to answer quickly. Joanne, favorite color?
Purple.
Purple. Robin?
Blue.
Blue.
Pink.
Pink. All right. And last but not least, what is your favorite data point? Favorite data point, Joanne?
Oh, so my favorite data point is whatever your favorite data point is that week.
Okay.
So whatever yours is, that's mine for the day.
All right. I like it. Robin, your favorite data point?
I'm going to pass.
That's a hard one. Jackie?
Gross margin.
Gross margin? Yeah. All right. So I think that what we covered today, you've heard quite a lot about the importance of preparing for this type of engagement. And I think our panelists today have really given you some great ideas for the things that you need to focus on as you go down and as I said before, through this journey, because it is a journey, you're taking it with a partner, and there's a lot of other people involved, as you've kind of heard. So just kind of, as you're going through and as you've listened to this, hopefully you've absorbed that, because we have the client, and at the client you have multiple stakeholders, you have suppliers that are involved, you've got the MSP partner coming in, and they're trying to help do this, you're leveraging their expertise. So keep those things in mind as you go through. It's a lot to manage. And we don't have any questions at this point, but we will post some questions and answers that we've had in the past when we post this up in the recording. We hope that this has been helpful for you. We'd like to thank our wonderful panelists today. Joanne, thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome.
And Robin, thank you.
Thank you.
And Jackie, thank you.
Thank you.
It's been great. Hopefully you guys will look for this and other webinars and information at yo.com, and we appreciate you listening today.